Welcome to Bizarre Podcast.
The Hoia Baciu Forest lies in Romania, in the heart of Transylvania, home to the one and only Vlad the Impaler, or as you may know him simply as Count Dracula. Over the many years, the Hoia Baciu Forest has become famously known as the Bermuda Triangle of Romania. Now, apparently the Hoia Baciu Forest got its name after a shepherd. Now, this shepherd apparently went into the forest with 200 sheep that he was herding, but unfortunately the shepherd never emerged from the forest, and neither did his 200 sheep. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find any more information on the shepherd and his sheep. There just doesn't seem to be any other reference to him or his name anywhere. So if it's true, his identity has simply been lost to time or simply a nice urban legend. So like I said, the forest is known as the Bermuda Triangle, where things just simply disappear, as the shepherd did. He was never seen again, neither were his flock of sheep. That's the story. There are many more stories to come, but first of all, let me just tell you a little bit more about the forest, so you get a better understanding of what we're talking about here. Now, the Hoia Baciu Forest only covers an area of about 3 square kilometres, so it's not particularly a big forest, but that does not change the fact that it is often referred to as the world's most haunted forest and a hotspot for UFO sightings. The trees all seem to grow in an unnatural manner, winding and bending, growing close to the floor before they go upright, and it's also said, for reasons unknown, the trees seem to grow in a clockwise direction. It's just me. Now, if you make your way to the centre, you'll come across a big patch of earth where it is said nothing will grow. It's a big circular patch, many say, is in the middle of the forest. Now, I don't think it actually is. I think it's more or less towards the edge of the forest. Now, this big patch of land is locally known as a Poiana Rotunda. I think I've pronounced that right, Poiana Rotunda. This area is considered a dead zone and often referred to as a Devil's Circle. Other stories claim that the dead circular area of land was created by a UFO landing there at some point in the past and killing all vegetation forever. Even scientists have claimed it's a complete mystery as to why nothing will grow there. Nothing at all will grow in this particular area. Now, apparently when these scientists were doing the tests on the area, and this can be taken with a pinch of salt, apparently they found traces of radiation in the soil. Now, to many, this is proof that this was possibly a landing site for a UFO somewhere in the past, and this radiation has been left there and has contaminated the earth. It's also said that if you were to venture in the forest late at night, you may come across a group of people, or, for a better word, a cult, holding a seance in the middle of the dead zone, or, if you prefer, the Devil's Circle. In the Devil's Circle they would hold a seance and try and communicate with spirits or demons or devils of the forest. Now, other people believe when these people are holding the seances, they're trying to open a portal to another world, as it is often believed that the forest is like a thin veil for here and someplace else. Other stories tell of strong red glowing lights that appear to people whilst walking through the forest, peering at them through a fog mist-like substance. In 1968, a military technician named Emil Barnier was in the forest with his girlfriend and friends. Emil's girlfriend spotted a strange silver disc floating in the sky over the trees. She showed Emil, who saw it and managed to get a picture before it disappeared. Now, Emil, his girlfriend and his friends all saw the flying saucer, and they watched it for a little over 2 minutes before it shot off and disappeared. Now, the picture was examined and viewed with a skeptical eye, but no evidence could be found of any tampering whatsoever. If you need any more convincing that Emil may have been telling the truth, well, what I can tell you about Emil is that he never ever once changed his story about what he saw. Even though after all these years he was constantly ridiculed, he was constantly told that he had mistaken the UFO for a weather balloon, and eventually it did apparently cost him his job. So for him to still claim that he saw what he saw, even after all this shaming and ridiculing and losing his job, I mean, that has got to give this story a little bit of credence, if you ask me. Visitors to the forest have also reported feeling very anxious and unnerved, and have an overwhelming urge to leave pretty much as soon as they arrive. People also report leaving with scratch marks, headaches, and strange rashes on their body. Also, some people have the distinct feeling that they have been followed by something that is clearly not visible to the human eye. Sometimes people report footsteps following them, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot behind them, and other times people hear horse hooves trotting through the mud. But people have also seen these so-called ghosts. It has been reported on many occasions that the forest can fill up with a deep mist-like fog, a thick fog, and inside the fog, deep red burning eyes can be seen peering at you as you walk through the forest. Now, it has also been reported that other apparitions of black shadowy figures have been seen in the forest, lurking behind trees or simply standing in plain sight, just staring at you. Also, there have been sightings of ancient soldiers from totally different timelines, all wearing different uniform or attire. And it has also been said that from time to time these apparitions of the soldiers can be seen engaging in combat, violent combat. It's also said that when you visit this forest, time can feel very disjointed, and a lot of people claim that time does not seem to run in the same way it would run outside of the forest. Many people claim that they had only been in the forest for, say, an hour, when in reality, when they left the forest, they found out that they'd actually been gone maybe 3 to 5 hours. So they'd lost quite a considerable amount of time, and they just could not explain why. Now, maybe they just got into the forest and lost track of time, and maybe they're having a good time, maybe. But to lose a few extra hours is quite a big thing, I would say, and something you would notice and be freaked out about if it happened to you. And that brings me to the next story, which is probably the most famous story involving the Hoia Baciu Forest, and probably the more well-known story, especially to the locals. And it involves the disappearance of a 5-year-old little girl. Now, it is believed that one day a family went for a walk in the forest. A little 5-year-old girl with a mother and a father. And at some point during the walk in the forest, the little girl must have wandered off from her parents, and she was simply lost. They could not find her anywhere. Her mother and father looked all over the forest. They spent all night looking for her, but they simply could not find her. Eventually, darkness came, and they had no choice but to leave. They couldn't find their daughter, so they had to leave the forest and return at first light. And they returned the day after that, and the day after that, but they could not find their daughter. And eventually they had to come to terms that maybe, or most certainly, the daughter was lost to them now. The forest had simply taken her. And tragically, she was now, more than likely, dead. And the parents had to simply get on with their life as best they could. Although being a parent myself, I know that would be impossible. Now, according to the legend, a whole 5 years later, the little girl walked out of the forest with not a scratch upon her. Her clothes were immaculate, and here is a really, really strange part. She hadn't aged a day. She was still 5 years old. It was as though the little girl had simply stepped through time and walked out 5 years in the future. A split second for her, 5 years for everybody else. And according to the little girl, when she was reunited with her mother and father, everything was normal. And to her, nothing was unusual. To her, it had been instantaneous. She'd stepped through some kind of portal in time and stepped straight out 5 years later, and nothing strange happened. But to her parents, she'd been missing 5 years, presumed dead, and all of a sudden, she was back. Now, it is also said that many people venture into the forest to commit suicide, and there is an actual story of a man who ventured into the forest and did just that. It is also said that now this gentleman's ghost wanders around the forest, forever trapped there, and every now and again you will hear a deathly scream coming from somewhere in the forest, somewhere in the distance, and this is believed to be the scream of the gentleman who committed suicide. There have also been stories circulating of a tall, black, elongated man who walks the trails of the forest, and he is believed to look very similar to Slender Man. But I will say this, these stories were circulating long before Slender Man was ever even thought up. Now, there is one more thing I will leave you with before I end today's episode. Now, as I said at the beginning of the episode, Transylvania is probably most well known for Count Dracula, or the man he was famously based on, the real life man, Vlad the Impaler. Now, it is believed that the dismembered corpse of Vlad the Impaler is buried in different parts of the Hoia Baciu Forest, because it is believed that Vlad the Impaler was in fact executed in the Hoia Baciu Forest. He was beheaded and dismembered, and his remains are scattered all over the forest and buried in certain areas. And it is said that the ghost of Vlad the Impaler also resides amongst the trees of the Hoia Baciu Forest. Do you believe the Hoia Baciu Forest is haunted? Do you believe the Hoia Baciu Forest is a UFO hotspot? Do you believe the Hoia Baciu Forest is responsible for some very strange time slips? As always, I'm going to let you guys decide that. You take care of yourself and each other, and I'll see you on the next episode of Bizarre Podcast. Oh, and if you decide to go for a walk, probably best to stay clear of the forests, just for now.